First, our top story of the morning is involving the District Court appeals and Schneider driver that won his case in being defined as an employee on the company while being classified as an independent contractor. John Kingston joins us this morning. John, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Anthony and Kaylee. Good to be back.
Good to have you again, John. And not talking about diesel today, but we are continuing this thread of weird classifications of laborers versus an independent contractor and an employee driver. Give us a little bit of an overview about this case involving Schneider National and this one driver.
Well, a driver named Eric Brandt, who only worked for them for about 6 months, filed suit in 2020, saying that he was hired as an independent contractor, but for all intents and purposes, he was an employee. He filed suit against Schneider. The lower court ruled in favor of Schneider, and he appealed. And this is a motion to dismiss. He basically appealed the motion to dismiss. And the appellate court on the motion to dismiss put it back into the district court. So now I've had views from two lawyers, from two separate sides of the legal side, the legal sector. One saying that this is not a big deal because it's a motion to dismiss, and that's not a big deal. It's not really a final word. It goes back to the lower court now, where it could get settled. It might get certified as a class. I'm checking that out to see whether it's they're going to try to make a class out of it, and then there could be a big payoff by Schneider, and then there's no legal decision that goes into the body of law regarding an independent contractor status. The appellate court decision sides with Brandt on basically pretty much everything, saying yes, if you look at what he did, what his responsibilities were, what his lack of freedom was. Yeah, he was an employee, not an independent contractor. But because it's a motion to dismiss, it's not the final word on it. We have to have a trial on that. And if it settles, and there's a class action and it settles and the lawyers take a third, and then, you divide the rest of the settlement up among, 300 people, if it becomes a class action, then you really haven't gotten anywhere. But the language in the appellate court decision was pretty stark. This was a fairly standard lease arrangement that you find in the industry, and the appellate court said, "Yeah, this is an employee. This is not an independent contractor." So if this ever kind of entered the body of law, the kind of a final decision, I think it's significant. I think would be a significant precedent going forward.
And John, when we're looking at the definition of an independent contractor, where does this come from? Who's really kind of setting this in place?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, when I first started covering this issue, I figured I'd stumble upon the absolute final word on independent contractor status, that there was a decision somewhere out there in the ether that told you everything you needed to know. And then I learned pretty quickly that there are numerous definitions and numerous decisions regarding what is an independent contractor. So, we have the ABC test, as we know from California and AB5. We have the economic realities test, which is what was at issue here. And the thing is, the economic realities test can be looked at a couple of ways. The Trump administration rule on independent contractors at the Department of Labor used the economic realities test, which is a 6-point thing. But it said there are two core tests, and their interpretation of those two core tests were more likely to find that a worker was an independent contractor rather than an employee. If you take the economic realities test the way the appellate court did here, and you looked at all 6 of them, you're more likely to say that they're an employee. Then you have something called the, Borello test. I won't go into it because I really can't do it off the top of my head. That's another significant piece of another significant legal decision that is often cited in litigation regarding independent contractor status. So there is no one final word. There are many words, and there will always be many words. And when you figure, if you start to get litigation under the ABC test in California, you're going to have a whole new body of law there. So this will keep lawyers very busy for the foreseeable future.
So the Supreme Court decision to not take action on the AB5 ruling has kind of showed that I'd almost call it apathetic, I guess, to them getting involved in these types of labor disputes and labor classifications. Do you think that this is a trend that we could actually see kind of being standard across the federal government? And do we get to a place, I guess the overall question is, do we get to a place where maybe the Department of Labor or the federal government itself says, you know what, we don't have enough interest to really hand down these rulings on what is and what is not an independent contractor, and passes that off to the states? Or does the federal government take back that power and then supersede everybody and say, you know what, this is our definition regardless?
No, the federal government is very much involved. Right now, there's two tracks going on. At the Department of Labor, there's under its wage and hour division, there was a standard that was promulgated in the Obama administration that was, again, more favorable to the idea that a worker is an employee rather than an independent contractor. Then the Trump administration came along, and it actually took them full 4 years to put in their own rule. They announced their rule like 2 weeks before Joe Biden took office. So Joe Biden comes in, and the Biden administration withdraws that rule and says, well, we're going to go to a different rule that we're going to draw up. Everybody figured that it would be very similar to what the Obama administration did. Then a court came in and said to the Biden administration, no, you can't do that. The Trump administration rule went back into effect. That now is the standard at the Department of Labor's wage and hour division. And the expectation here is that there'll be the Biden administration has said that it is doing a review. It will have its own rule. The old rule, the new Biden administration rule might just be the old Obama rule, but there's a lot of fear in the independent contractor community that they might put in the ABC test. Then the second thing that's going on is over at the National Labor Relations Board, and this is an issue that came up in the Brandt versus Schneider case, where they have been running on a test called the Super Shuttle case. It involved the Super Shuttle company that takes you to the airport. And that decision, or that standard from a few years ago, was favorable to the idea of a worker being an independent contractor. Now the NLRB, which of course now is dominated by Democrats, is looking at the issue, and they're saying, we're going to look at it again, and we might bring in the FedEx rule, which was the one before the Super Shuttle rule, and is more favorable to the idea of a worker being an employee. So, these are two federal agencies that are very, very engaged in the question of independent contractor status. And, it's a ping pong back and forth. And again, my father was an attorney, so this is not a backdoor joke against lawyers. They're all staying very busy. I mean, you had one rule, then you had another one, then you had another one. This is like a gift to the trucking and labor legal profession, because these companies need guidance on what to do. It used to be that there might be a standard and it would stay for a while. And now just on this one, you could have three in a matter of 12 years at both the Department of Labor and the National Labor Relations Board. It's just crazy.
So you mentioned that it's that ping pong back and forth, which obviously puts the independent contractor, if they're operating on their own, in a very difficult position. It also puts the companies in a difficult position, because then that involves taxes and it involves benefits and it involves going back and forth. And so how do they stay in compliance if they're continually having to change to fit with the rules? Or do they just kind of go on and hope that they skate under the water, hope that nothing like this litigation comes into effect and eventually shows that they're out of compliance?
How do they stay in compliance? They talk to their lawyers, and the lawyers hopefully give them good advice to stay in compliance. But even that, it's tough. I mentioned before when we talked about AB5 in California, AB5, I think the legislation was like 12 or 13 pages long. A lot of it was, just kind of a recap of various things. So it's not particularly prescriptive. It doesn't say you have to do this, 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 and you can't do this, 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 and this, which is why there's going to need to be action taken by the state against companies that will be resolved one way or the other. And in the process, you will set up a body of law that will help companies decide what to do. As it is now, they're kind of flying along in the dark. Even the federal regulations are not totally prescriptive. They don't tell you that you can do A, B, C, and D, you can't do E, F, G, and H. So this is why you need very good legal counsel to help guide you through this, which is if you're a big company, you can afford, and if you're a smaller company, it's tough. So, and this is why, in California, the target of AB5 legislation, I should say AB5 litigation, is expected to be drayage companies, and they're not all that big. I mean, some of them are larger than others, but they're the ones that are going to need a legal assistance more than anything.
John, when we look at this case, does this do anything to really kind of push forward with AB5 being more of a precedent in other states, or does this really not factor into that at all?
Yeah, it's not, this is a federal case. The driver in question was hired by a Schneider, which is a Wisconsin corporation. There's no AB5 impact on this.
All right, John, thank you for joining us this morning to talk about this story. Is there anything else exciting that you're working on? I know you mentioned drilling deep coming out of the podcast ether and into the video show ether, which we love to hear. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, I noticed that, when you open FreightWaves.com, of course, up on the upper right, there's a little TV screen with the vast, or it doesn't matter whether you tune in at 8 a.m. in the morning or 2:30 a.m. There's always a video there. And I realized that drilling deep, being all audio, was really kind of out of the traditional FreightWaves approach to media, which is video. And so I really felt that I needed to be in that area, in that family of videos. So drilling deep can be found in that little corner video, and also the links at the bottom of the newsletter every day. I felt it was kind of holding the podcast back to be just the only audio podcast here in the FreightWaves family of podcasts and Freightcasts. So I decided to go video.
Exciting stuff, John. Welcome to the FreightWaves podcast video family. And thank you so much for joining us this morning and talking about this developing issue. We'll be sure to have you back on throughout the week.
Thank you.
Catch it drilling deep right now, anywhere that you get podcasts, and later on tv.freightwaves.com. Right now, we're going to head over to The Wall. We've got a first carrier update of the morning with Tony Mulvey and Donnie Gilbert.